Looking to the Book of Kings and the Book of Judges to try to find lessons for today. There was a point in Jewish history where a revolution was necessary, a regime change. In the Book of Kings, we have Judahite and Israelite kings who were assassinated. The Torah doesn't endorse anything. That was usually considered, wrongdoers who did such a thing. But sometimes it was God's will. For example, Yeravam's son Nadav was assassinated, and the entire family was wiped out. Was the assassin justified in doing that? Ostensibly not. But it was God's will that the house of Yeravam be destroyed because of their sins. So this assassin and his cohorts who destroyed his family were in God's rod, so to speak. Just like the Egyptians. The Egyptians, they were used as God's tool in the exile, and the Babylonians and the Romans, etc. It doesn't mean that what they're doing, that they were justified in what they're doing. They will not suffer the consequences of their actions. Like the Torah says, Games hagoy asher avodu don anochi. I also judged the Egyptians. The Egyptians had a task. If they had just enslaved the Jewish people, let's say, without bloodshed, in the most mildest way possible, they maybe would have not been smitten so harshly. But the problem is they did it with relish. No one said they had to commit infanticide, right? They didn't have to do it. They have to do avodas parech, ya'avodu. Not who said it had to be parech, So they suffered for that. But there was one case in the Book of Kings where revolution, regime change, and wiping out the royal house was prescribed. Yehu was in charge of wiping out the house of Ahab. The prophets anointed him as such. I think that we talked about the horsemen, the war and famine, and the rest of it. So we're due for a famine. Just from biblical history, we had pestilence, we have war, next is famine, and then exile. That's how it goes. So we're in the midst of war. I don't think famine's coming because we're still suffering war. Okay, the war has not subsided. Just because you pretend there's no war, you say there's no war, and you act like there's no war, doesn't mean the war isn't there. So I don't know how we could go about getting the proper regime change we have here. We have to watch out. You know why? Because these things are usually not peaceful. Is that's what people are asking for. You can't harm your own people. I said we went over the American Declaration of Independence. All the grievances against His Majesty George III that the colonists had can be reasonably ascribed also to the people of Israel today against the ruling class. Especially that raising the taxes. The effective tax rate. Can you imagine how much people are taxed? They say, Haredites, they don't pay as much income tax as everybody else. How much VAT do they pay on everything? My electricity bill says I have to pay 67 shekels a month just for the privilege of having an electricity and electric bill. You know that? That's the starting. So the starting point is 67 shekels, and then I pay a little bit more than half a shekel for every kilowatt per hour, right? So that keeps going up, and then I pay VAT on that. So do you pay VAT? VAT on or some sales tax on your electricity?
I don't know. I'm sure there's all kinds of taxes and stuff.
On electricity, okay? Let's just say that. And the water also, you pay for water. The reason the electricity costs so much is many places like Gaza are electrified and hydrated on our dime. They don't pay for it. They just give it for free, like their food and everything else.
Their electricity is free?
Yeah. So I remember asking someone when the war started because they refused to lay siege to the enemy. And they were harming politicians who are not politicians who have been saying this. How could IDF soldiers go to fight into Gaza if their own government is sponsoring their enemy?
Is the way the government gives all the people of Gaza free electricity and free water?
Yeah.
Really?
And it's supposed to collect the bill from the PA, but it never has.
What about
there are places in the PA also. They get free electricity.
Like Nukhmas, all these places get Jabba, get free electricity.
Because they don't have their own grid.
And free water.
Yeah, but it's Israel's water. Where are they going to get water from?
So, and Israel isn't even paid for it. Not paid for it.
Yeah. So you pay for it.
So the Jews pay for it, but not the
Yeah, yeah. So this is shocking, but that's what you do. That's the people
so,
are
so they
paying.
use it. They use it just
Yeah,
extravagantly. Water and electricity.
whatever. They don't seem. I don't think they have to. That's at least their troubles when they actually made a war and then they have to go into hiding. The Gaza tunnels, they don't need. You can't run a generator in a tunnel, Daddy. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You know why?
No oxygen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do they electrify their tunnels? They're on the grid.
Yeah.
Okay? Understand that. The hospitals get free water and electricity, tons of it. The hospital is the main terror base. If you were a commander, you would say, train your fire. Just look for the largest building, largest, most central buildings. Those would be the ones knocked down first with the bombs that make them collapse underneath. Then your problem would be solved, but you can't. So it's shocking that they send in troops and they're not laying siege. They're doing the opposite. They're providing the enemy. So I said, well, there were people who said we have to stop the trucks going in. Civilians wanted to stop the trucks from going in, so they arrested those civilians. You have to let it. I don't know how much. How much did the Allies supply Nazi Germany with? There was a single line Das Mikra, which said that when the Navi came and anointed Yehu, he was the commander of the Israelite army. He was told you have to overthrow your king, your master, and destroy his house. So all the other officers of the army, when they heard this, they immediately, accepted it. Like, okay, yes, Yehu's the new king. Let's overthrow the king. He had support right away from all his underlings, right? So the Das Mikra says it's because they were already fed up with their king. We're talking about Achav's son Yehoram, Joram, king for about most a dozen years, about a decade of just tragedy after tragedy during this king's reign, famines and wars. Never any respite. That's what it was. So they're already fed up, even though the Omarides had initially brought about the greatest success for the Israelite kingdom. Okay, so what happened? So they had dissatisfaction and disappointment in the current king, and so by default it was okay, overthrow the king and put in a new king. Let's go to someone else. What is this like? They had, for example, kings of what happens in the 10 tribes is that in the land of Yehuda, when there was an assassination, a king was taken out. You know what happened? The people put the proper Davidic monarch back on the throne, right? Rabbi Avi Miller likes to point this out. They wouldn't. They knew that it had to be someone of this line had to be king, and kings were assassinated or fell in battle. But the people made sure that the right man was on the throne after that. In the 10 tribes, the assassin would kill the king, wipe out his family. Only one case with the family not wiped out, and then he would reign himself until eventually his time came. That happened many times. Why is it that it happened there? Why couldn't they behave like their cousins in the south? Why did they show any loyalty? So Rabbi Victor Miller and my wife talk about the prohibition of saying the D word in a relationship, divorce. Why? Because it's infectious. We've really noticed now when young people go into marriage thinking of divorce, you could hear a bride talking about there's a certain uncertainty, but if it doesn't work out, like at least there's a backup plan. Divorce is the backup plan. Where they get that from? They maybe have gotten from parents or other people to whom they're close. And I'm not saying anybody who came from divorced parents is going to get divorced themselves, or that people whose parents stick together don't get divorced. Just trying to say it increases the likelihood of something. It makes it an attitude. Okay, so like Rick Miller says, broken marriages, it's infectious. I wouldn't say it's genetic or congenital. You don't inherit it, but it is a sort of infectious and it's conquerable. So you can have it that a woman's hanging out with too many of her friends who are like that, so that gets it ruined. Or one divorcee who's around who's ruining everybody else, right? The 10 tribes kingdom was created of what? Divorce. The whole point of the break off of the 10 tribes was we're not happy with our king. We've had the Davidians only ruling for 2 generations. The second generation already wasn't satisfied. Let's appoint someone else. So how is it they gave, let's say, Solomon and David were on the throne for a combined 80 years, right? And then the people said, enough of that. How long was Yeravam on the throne? How long did his regime last? Well, according to the Torah, he got 20 years, 22 years. Like the Vilna Gaon points out, the first year was not a complete year. The last year was not complete. Barely 21 years total. But according to the way the Navi describes it, parts of 22 years, 20 years in the middle. His own son reigned, get this, in the second year and the third year of King Asa, but then it describes 2 years. That is, he reigned in parts of 2 years. Could be just a few months, like 4 months here and 3 months in that year. That's what the Tanakh would call 2 years. Okay? So Yeravam's dynasty lasted at most maybe 22 years. Okay? Incomplete. It was very short. By then, the people were ready for the next usurper. When his son was assassinated, the whole family wiped out, there was no reprisals. They just accepted the new master. And 20-something years later, they went through that same cycle. Wipe out and start again. So when it came now to rebel against Yoram's family, Achav's second son, and the fourth king in the line, the people were ready for it. You know why? Because this is what we do. You know, the national divorce has already been on the table for almost a century. So every time we have a new king, so let's go ahead with it. You know, a lot of bloodshed. And they went through this cycle a few more times before they were finally exiled. Okay? So this, I guess, this infectious use of divorce, it exists on the personal level with individuals, and it also exists on the national level. Okay? So we have to learn this lesson ourselves. Dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs, and almost a complacency or an apathy. Okay, where whatever it is we have is needs to be broken. People have to have, I guess, a take charge view of Jewish history. We have so much potential to have so much better if we would, I don't know, if we would actually just decide we want it better. You know, and I think the state of Israel doesn't keep halacha, so that's it. It's just that give up on it. No, we want to strive to create a halachic society. I understand what enabled a person like Yehu, the second Navi, said, "Hu Amar Hashem, you're the one chosen to throw off the yoke of your masters, lead a revolution in the Jewish country." He was the one who said he used to ride behind Ahab on his horse. Okay, he was there. He saw everything. He was the number two basically the number two in the kingdom. So how is it that he was able to take this inspiration, and actually go and do what he did? I don't know. Do we have such a person?